Welcome to IoTalks, your source for real talks with real builders in the blockchain and IoT industry. I'm your host, Larry. Blockchain is revolutionizing the way we think about data. Over 90% of the world's data has been created in the past few years, with much of that being generated by the Internet of Things. To make use of this data on blockchain, we need to store and organize this data efficiently and openly. So how will future blockchain networks manage their data in a decentralized fashion? How will IoT data be stored, tagged, and protected? We discuss these questions and more with our guest, Pavel Bains from Bluzelle. Please enjoy. Hey everyone, I'm here with Pavel, co-founder and CEO at Bluzelle. They're the distributed open source database service. Welcome, Pavel.
Hey Larry, thanks for inviting me on to IoTalks.
Absolutely. So yeah, today we're talking about the past, present, and future of databases. But before we get started, everyone in the blockchain industry has their own kind of unique story. How did you dive down this rabbit hole, Pavel?
Yeah, it was about 4 years ago. I was sitting around, and I came traditionally from the digital media gaming space, and friends of mine were just talking about Bitcoin, and it was because they were a payment gateway for certain websites, and they're just talking about that they're starting to get people were asking about Bitcoin, and as I'd already heard it beforehand, and so then I said, hey, let me read up about this stuff. And like you said, once you start reading something about Bitcoin, about the distributed nature, finance, economics, distributed computing, basic stuff that, a bunch of us went to school for and found interesting, it was like, whoa, it's all tied into one product. And then it's like, okay, what's the underlying technology behind it? And that's when blockchain started becoming known as kind of the word. And you started like, whoa, if this thing really works, it's going to do some crazy things.
Yeah.
I got into this. And that was really what kickstarted it.
Right. So just the genuine interest from the technical side, and also the kind of the Bitcoin bonanza that was going on back in the day.
Yeah.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Yeah. So, today, again, we're going to be talking about the past, present, and future of databases. But before we dive into some of the complex and, advanced things at Bluzelle, let's kick it off with some very basic fundamentals about databases. So, how would you explain what a database is to a beginner?
Yeah, so anybody, let's say if I was talking to my kids, it'd be, hey, a database is just a set of tables where we store information. So maybe it's my kid would be like, hey, it's your first name, last name, what soccer team you're on, what school you go to, and it's somewhere. Now, instead of me always going back to that table to write it, this is a technology solution where we can quickly search a list of all those names and saying, hey, who are all the 8 to 9-year-olds in Singapore that play soccer, and it would bring up and it'd filter out everybody else. So really it's just a large collection of data that organized in a way that is easily retrievable.
Right. So anytime we're on our mobile apps or on our computers, we make like a transaction or something, that data is talking to other data somewhere in a database and is also being stored there as well.
That's right. So if we're making just even a simple payment, right, it's got to look up, hey, who's a payer? Pavel goes up, looks up that's authenticated, the bank is here, all that information's there, and they can just basically make that request to do what the application needs to do with that data.
Right, absolutely. So this kind of concept of a physical storage space and a table structure has kind of been implemented in a lot of different approaches, right? In the 21st century, we've evolved from really on-premises databases where it's fully managed by the owner to more cloud databases, and now this concept of distributed databases. So, can you kind of talk us through how this evolution happened and what kind of technical and non-technical milestones really have transformed this industry in the way it has?
Yeah, I think it really comes down to one thing, and that is people are just becoming more specialized at what they want to do. So when you're on premise, the technology was big. You needed to have somebody like a full IT person running the database, racks, things like that. Now, as people started, and that was no matter what product you do, you could be like a payments company, a video game company, a radio company, like whatever it is. If you're doing something online or you're doing something in tech, you had to have that on-premise database. Now, what you're seeing is people just started becoming more specialized, saying, well, why are we running all that in-house and being like an IT? Let's say we're an e-commerce company. Why am I also an IT company? So the cloud kind of allowed us to push that away, saying, hey, I don't need to rent, I don't need to buy all these servers and take on this capital cost. If somebody else has already aggregated and we can just rent it for what we need and use, then that happens there. So I think it's really about that specialization. And now you're moving to distributed as people are becoming even more specialized, saying, well, cloud might not be so efficient because I have to guess. We're always still playing catch up that if customers go somewhere else, we've got to deploy more instances. Maybe things become more managed and the instances are already out there and self-managed, which is kind of almost like what blockchain is. It's distributed. So now people become even more specialized because all they want to do is build their product, whether it's, like I said, a fintech product, an IoT product, a gaming app. It doesn't matter. They don't want to run backends.
Right. No, absolutely. And, I think let's touch upon all of those kind of things, like just explaining kind of the evolution here. So, starting with these on-premises databases, you mentioned, these are fully managed. Like maybe this isn't really too relevant to, some of the millennials nowadays, but, back then there's always folks, that require someone to be managing the rack, someone physically at the data center in case the servers blow up. And now, all of that is fully managed by service providers like Google, for example, really triggered this movement from on-premises over to cloud.
Yeah, I think when the racks and the big computers were coming up, where you had to be a large company, huge capital expenditure, so you needed companies like IBM and Oracle who were servicing those. If you think about like when the internet really started blowing up about 20 years ago, more companies started moving online, more startups, even from 2003 onwards, people started becoming a thing, and more. So you didn't want to really run those huge racks and need that. And so companies like ourselves, they were able to say, hey, we can just rent this from the cloud and not worry about managing any of that stuff. So I think the switch was the on-premise still caters to those big, larger companies, but the smaller companies that are coming up or mid-size saying, well, we don't need that. And those, current providers like Oracle and everybody else was almost too expensive or too much hands-on for us to run because we know the technology, where AWS, Google, even Microsoft Cloud started saying, hey, okay, these guys already know enough. They can just kind of work with us. So I think as technology became easier and the companies became smaller and leaner, they didn't need that constant hand-holding that the big on-premise companies needed.
Right. So it's more about, as you mentioned, specialization, but also that flexibility to kind of, pick and create their own bundles of services that they really need.
Yeah. Like, a good example is when I was talking to guys I know who are still in the video gaming industry, and they said, over 10 years ago, we'd use like one or two, maybe like two or three middleware providers or outside sources to do things. Everything we built in-house. They go, now we're using like 25.
Right.
Because it's like, why are we doing that? We should just focus on making the game.
Yeah, exactly. One thing I like to, refer back to is this, good framework by Union Square Ventures around kind of the dynamics between the infrastructure layer and the application layer. It basically says that, based on the infrastructure available today, really dictates what kind of applications can be built. But based on the future demands of applications will dictate what kind of future infrastructure needs to be built. And that really comes in different cycles, right? Maybe that on-prem to cloud was one cycle, the cloud to distributed is one cycle. Like, how would you explain what cycle we're in right now and kind of what the value proposition is for this new wave of technology?
I think we're at the beginning of the distributed because products are now becoming more global and less regional specific. So going back to, say, games, they used to be North American made, North American audience, Korean made, Korean audience. But now people are living in so many different places and games are just resonating. So you got players from all over the world, like look at Fortnite, right?
Right.
It needs to be high performance, low latency. So, and then let's just move not just gaming, but IoT products or even things like Instagram or any of our modern applications. It wasn't just built for the West. It's like people all over are using it. So as more people became online and started using products that weren't just regional specific but globally based, it almost requires a new structure of certain infrastructure technologies that can actually make sure that the products perform fast and are used to people the quickest.
Right. Yeah. And one thing that you guys preach at Bluzelle is this concept of catering to not only the blockchain industry but also the serverless computing industry. What does that even mean? Like, what is a serverless application versus a server-based one, and what kind of new opportunities is that bringing?
serverless and decentralized, it's almost the same thing, right? And what it means is people just don't want to run as much backends. And so, for example, I was talking to somebody and they said, hey, they've got a number of, they're doing everything serverless, which is serverless compute means they don't need to be managed all these instances. AWS can do it. And when instead of the computer being on all the time and then being charged for it, it only charges them when that application is being used. So for example, he said that, hey, we've got a bunch of applications for our company that everybody uses. Some are used less, some use it more. So the ones that are less, we still have to support it, but it wasn't worth the cost for having a whole backend set up for it. By going serverless, it means that, hey, only when it's turned on and that compute function is running to run that application, that's when they're getting charged and renting it and paying for it. So it's really almost like an on-demand computing, I would say.
Right. Go really expanding upon that, specialization, flexibility, and more on-demand kind of pay-as-you-go kind of services, right?
Yeah, and that's just probably an overall trend of everything. You kind of summed it up well right there.
That's true. Yeah. Along that same theme, right? One thing that is really clear in the past 3 years is, 90% of all the new data has been generated just in the past few years. So, given this massive influx of data, how is the database industry service all of this new data? I imagine that's really the focus of a lot of the big tech giants like the Oracles, SAPs, IBMs. How does all this new data really fit into the bigger picture?
Oh, it's causing a huge ripple effect everywhere, right? Because now you're collecting and consuming all this data. Data has become like oil, right? Of people using it as value. So you got analytics companies building on top of that, so they can do better analysis, machine learning. That go over. You guys are in this space. IoT is going to collect tons of data and give it out. So I think the database industry or data is just figuring out what are more efficient ways to manage and deliver that data to the owner of that data or the company, so they can make better informed decisions. So I think it's making an effect on, hey, more data centers are needed around the world. Manage, run all these data, so they need to be optimized themselves. How do you take that data and structure it or manage it in an efficient way that can be pushed to the user and all the players? So I think it's just requiring more and more efficiency. And that's why I think like distributed, decentralized methods are actually going to make it a lot easier.
Right. And I'm wondering, obviously, I think, everyone agrees that this distributed and decentralized method is the future, right? But as far as how far into the future is still a little tricky to pinpoint because, even though this new technology is available, doesn't always mean that it's truly adopted on day one, right? I remember, back in my consulting days, the last project that I did was for a big financial market utility. And that was just to move their data from on-prem to the cloud. And, they were really, really antsy about it until they got kind of some FINRA, which is a big financial regulator, they actually moved their data first to the cloud, which kind of presented this green light for everyone in the industry to do that. But before that, they were running, mainframe and DB2, which are very, 20-year-old technologies. So, the question is reliability still more important than performance? And where is that tipping point in the future?
I think the tipping point, reliability is always, for the larger companies, they're going to go for that. It's going to be, and this is for all of us in the industry, I think it's going to be really around new applications that are being built. It's going to be hard for any platforms, and it's not just databases, anybody in blockchain decentralized, to replace something that's existing and, like you said, reliable from these bigger companies. It's very hard. But as people are starting to build new applications, then now they're starting to explore what are better ways to do it. Like there's companies that have said that they've gone completely serverless. Soon you'll see companies, I'll say, we only use decentralized technologies because we see the benefit. But I think it will be when company X really says, okay, we've got products out, we're building a new product or a new software application. What's a better way to do this? And then they're going to start researching out, just like they do with cloud and everything else. So I think
it's really exciting times because, it's almost like I think corporates are now in a new model of how they partner with startups. Like before, a corporation partnering with a startup is just in M&A talks. Like, I want to acquire your company, so you don't like beat me out of the market. But now it's almost like, corporations, I feel, are more receptive to learning about, this distributed wave of technology, because they see a lot of the smaller players, the smaller application builders, kind of leapfrogging a lot of maybe the pain points that they've had in the past. Have you kind of had the same experience in that sense?
Yeah, I think you nailed it. Is that the corporations now are looking at, hey, how can we work with these smaller ones, educate themselves, show that they're being, have their innovations, and instead of doing it all in house, is like, hey, who's out there already doing it? How can we work with them and basically leverage each other or partner up? So I definitely see that kind of working and happening. I mean, we're talking to several ourselves, and it's like, hey, we understand what we know. We want to get into space. If you can figure out a specific market around there that we can work together and use your technologies to sell to our existing customers, then they've got something innovative.
Right.
It's almost
really.
I guess it would. Sorry, it almost like, think of all those corporate, we're all indie artists, and we need to go to Spotify or Apple Music and saying, you're going to bring me reach and distribution. I'll bring you good content, put it out there. It's almost kind of like that model. It's like those corporates opening up to that, saying they know what they're good at, and let's work with the smaller companies.
Right, exactly. It's always so interesting to hear the story about how these industries evolve. And I think now that we have a good context on the history of databases, let's talk more about the present, starting with Bluzelle. So you introduced it a little bit, but tell us, what is Bluzelle, and who is the team behind it?
Yeah, so Bluzelle is what you said. It's a decentralized database. Our goal is, hey, we're the database for next-gen applications, or Web 3.0. We touched on those needs already of people who want to be, they're globally diverse, multi-region. They don't want to manage anything on the back end. So products like ours, like a database like ours, needs to accommodate and fill those requirements. It was founded by myself, Pavel, and my CTO Neeraj, and really, our history was, quickest thing was a couple years ago we started just doing blockchain projects, like dev work for banks, insurers, cutting our teeth, and then from that, when we built certainly like smart contract or insurance applications and identity application, we had to use a traditional database, and there's kind of some configuring done. And we thought, well, if we're building a decentralized application on a decentralized platform like Ethereum, shouldn't the whole stack eventually start being decentralized? And we started looking at where some of the pain points or where the gaps were, and we're like, hey, a decentralized database could be something that's really well needed in the stack of an entire decentralized technology stack. And that's really how we got going and started exploring that. Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, I was just reading a little bit about Bluzelle last week, and I like this quote from actually the NewsCypher CTO. It says, verbatim, Bluzelle is working on what I think is the most practical approach to decentralized data storage, building a vital component for the future decentralized internet. So a lot of the themes that you just mentioned, but help us break down this quote, around the two kind of clauses there. One is Bluzelle is the most practical approach and to decentralized data storage, and the second is a vital component for the future decentralized internet. So starting with why is it the most practical approach compared to maybe like an IPFS or a Filecoin or some of the other players in the space, and why is the work that all these companies are doing really crucial for the future of Web 3.0? Well, our approach is, so IPFS, Filecoin is really about file storage. So IPFS is more like AWS S3, right? Filecoin can be more like a Dropbox that make it more consumer friendly on that side. So we'd be complementary because any application needs file storage, document storage, but they also need a database to run on.
Right. So that's kind of the table structure, less of the physical storage, more of the query tools and the drill down tools that you guys offer.
That's right. So any application needs, both components. Now, our approach is traditionally something people say like, hey, just, run the database like a blockchain. But that can cause problems in the sense that if you have all these nodes out there and they all need to be kept in sync and data continues coming up, it could slow the network down a lot because you got, let's say, thousands of nodes that all need to be in consensus.
Right.
So, and you don't want it in the traditional block form because now you got speed and performance issues. So what we try to do is our approach is we're not a blockchain, but we're using blockchain principles of consensus, of decentralization. And that might mean that, hey, consensus is only needed on what we call like a swarm, like a small group of nodes that they're quick, they can be sync with each other. And if they're all replicated and they're in sync, everything works well. And then you can also have massive numbers of replica nodes out there where data can continuously be retrieved at a fast pace. So really it's about blending, taking the blockchain principles, but not the blockchain, and applying it to the database structure.
Yeah, so definitely trying to capture, the high throughput. If you have it replicated in too many places, then you can't capture that kind of low latency, high throughput, but also the replicability of that database. So, if one node in the swarm kind of goes out, you can still have the full set. Yeah, it definitely makes sense. So the next question I have is just on that topic, right? Around high availability, high throughput, multi-region replication, and low latency are all kind of mission critical for database service providers. I think we talked a little bit about, how IPFS and Filecoin and some of the more data storage folks, handle that storage part. But talk to us more around the analytics and kind of the add-on and the complementary features you have to kind of these kind of data storage specific applications.
So we're like right now we're not doing analytics right now. It's like it's hard enough getting a database out there that's working.
Right.
Later on, once it's going, we can add, either partner up with companies that can do that or build the tools ourselves. But what we like the focus is, like you said, you mentioned others. It's like if somebody's building a new application, they're gonna have to pick. Let's say they're building on you guys, right? IoTX. They're gonna have to start figuring out, okay, where am I gonna store the files? What database am I gonna use? And the goal is really, hey, all the pieces is here's a decentralized database of Bluzelle. Decentralized file storage might be just IPFS or Filecoin. Good. Those things work together, and now they've got a full decentralized stack.
Right. Yeah. Absolutely. That totally makes sense. And I think what you said around like decentralizing the entire stack is really interesting. Like I love to see even people at the networking layer, like I guess what you call layer 0, really trying to decentralize that and create, the future of Web3. Just not just one component, but kind of the combination of a lot of these different forces. As this is IoTalks, I wanted to jump into some more, IoT related topics. So, everyone knows that IoT is a hugely data heavy industry. Today there's about 10 billion IoT devices out there. And, that number is anywhere, there's a lot of different estimates around 50 billion or 100 billion devices in the coming years. But not only are the number of the devices themselves increasing, but the capabilities, the amount of data, types of data that are coming out of them are, also increasing at a huge rate, right? So, for an IoT developer, both in, I guess, the traditional space and the blockchain space, how do they go about choosing like the right database solution for them? Are they differentiating based on real technical infrastructure differentiators, or is it more the white glove service that we're seeing today?
I think it's going to be is the specific needs. Like, you guys know this. IoT has become a catch-all for everything, and there's certain IoT devices that serve certain needs. Just touching on the exponential increase is, 5G networks is only going to increase the number of IoT devices. And as you mentioned, IoT devices are limited in computing and storage ability. Just a simple device that's tracking some biking in a remote area and maybe that information there and no need to share it out would be not the best one. But as a database, if you do have multiple devices that need to be talking and sharing information in real time, and a lot of that data is unstructured, and that's where like a Bluzelle type of database comes in. Those are the pain points that we solve, where they're really wanting that high performance and storage. And if that customer is really at the edge and giving that information, like the IoT device is closest to the customer, that's how we solve those problems.
Right. You guys mentioned edge computing a little bit, right? I was rewatching kind of the Silicon Valley TV show, and they had put a whole database on like a decentralized network of smart fridges. which you can kind of call as like a kind of an edge storage database solution. I mean, is that the vision for the future of decentralized databases? It's like any device that can support the table structure and has the physical storage can be part of this global storage network, or is it more still concentrated to capable machines?
No, I mean, that would be the ultimate vision, is that every device, whether it's a console, a mobile phone, you've got all these devices out there with tons of storage on them or computer capacity. We should be able to network all of them and have them being in use. It's just a matter of making it accessible.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think in the context maybe of that, we have to pick secure devices, obviously, right? Like security in the context of blockchain is like hyper important. But blockchain itself kind of is an unencrypted data structure that guarantees its trust and its integrity through kind of replication and openness, right? And I guess in the context of a decentralized database, that requires some pretty fine-grained access controls. Like, how do you guys think about the consumer data privacy implications? And are you guys kind of offering those kind of modules or services to users in the future?
Yeah, those. I think there's other ones working on it. Like, we had these concepts before of ideas that we can potentially do once it's full databases, like a data wallet. Mm-hmm. So, hey, that's my data, my information. If Instagram or Facebook wants to do it, I can authorize it. Mm-hmm. And let's say I want to go off that service, I cut off authorization. So they're never actually storing or keeping their own data of me. It's always in my data wallet. But then I can just act using information because I'm essentially using a free product from them. So I think those are the type of concepts that, hey, either maybe in the next, once your database is out there, we can build those ourselves, or other people are building data wallets and saying, hey, put that on top of us.
Yeah.
What happens?
Right. I mean, I love that concept around, consumers having the choice to selectively share either their data or keep it fully private or buy, sell, trade it as they so choose. What kind of, on the technology side, I see it pretty linearly, right? I think we're trending towards that, but there's also kind of the social change and social constructs of, flipping the model. Like get consumer change, and changing anyone's behavior is obviously very hard, but that's a very big one. Like, do you think, like, what kind of things will really turn the tide there? Is it going to be incentives based? Is it going to be kind of follow the leader type of style, or how do we get towards that vision of a more consumer owned world?
I don't think it's going to be incentive based. Mm-hmm. I think it's going to be just a breaking point where people, even over the past year, people are becoming more and more aware of privacy. And I mean, all these products that they're using, we're doing all this stuff for the past 10, 12 years.
Yeah.
But becoming more, people are like, well, what are they really doing? And they're questioning it and choosing how they share their information or what they do with certain free-based products. Mm-hmm. So I don't think it's a matter of incentivization. It's going to be just like kind of a tipping point where people are like, okay, enough's enough. This has gone too far, and I want big control of my data. Maybe on the incentive side, I guess it could be where is that I still know, like, let's say you're using a free product like Instagram, and they need to, support that. Maybe the incentive is that, hey, okay, I'll give you access to my data, and if you resell it, make sure I just get a portion of it back, right? Like,
right.
Basically, it's like a bank. I'm depositing my data there. You're borrowing it, making money. At least give me a bit of a return for having it on there. Yeah. So maybe that's the model.
Right. I think that's really interesting. I mean, I'm really excited to see how that kind of the whole battle plays out, right? You have kind of regulation based in Europe right now in relation to consumer data. You have kind of, I guess you would say, government based even in China, right? China doesn't really have the openness of, consumer controls. And I guess you can call it in America and the North American countries, it's more corporation based, right? It's like you have these huge tech giants that really set the rules for how data privacy and data management is used in the traditional world. So seeing how those dynamics really play out would be really interesting. And maybe the correct answer is, a global standard, right? Nothing that has to do with, region specific regulations, but a global alternative that people can own their data on this kind of decentralized infrastructure. Do you kind of agree with that sentiment?
I mean, that'd be fantastic, right? Where individuals have the power and have their data, like they're running it like their own wallets, right? Financial, but it's like, hey, data is the finance, it's the new money. Let me be able to use that. And then, I mean, if we're all building out these infrastructures and doing all these things where the products can talk and communicate to each other, that's gonna really trigger that along and make it a lot easier. And maybe it'll just become, by the time my kids grow up, it'll just be normal for them to have their own data wallet and how they rent it out or sell it, right?
Yeah, yeah. I wanted to mention or ask about the business model of Bluzelle. So, as an open source project like IoTalks and most of the other players in this space, it's not really the IP itself in a way because it's fully open source, but kind of the community that's built around it, and also kind of the adoption of that open source standard, right? So, in addition to the data wallet, what are the kind of the other business models you're investigating with Bluzelle? And, what does the Bluzelle token kind of represent in kind of this incentive structure that we've been talking about?
Yeah, in the short term, the token is really about buying storage, right, on our network, and being able to do what, store X amount of gigabytes. This is how you're going to pay. In the future, like I said, is building different applications or products on top, which could be like you said, a data wallet, maybe a data marketplace where people can come, trade, give that information. Those would be like the different type of use cases. Or it could be also is, hey, when we're working with, companies like yourselves, maybe even distributed cloud, the decentralized cloud platforms that token swaps can easily be used by other products. I think anybody who's doing, if we're all, doing the same use cases, and it should be just like easily used by anybody in our selective ecosystems.
Right. Yeah. So we talked a lot about the past and the present of databases, and now let's jump forward to the future. So, we talked a little bit about, what the future vision in 20 years looks like, but, specifically within the scope of databases, right? Imagine that, all the things that Bluzelle wants to do between now and the next 5 years is completed. What does the world look like, and how does that really shift the industry?
Oh, wow. I mean, that's 5
question.
years out, as you said, everything's changing so rapidly in our blockchain crypto technology communities that it's hard to even envision that. I do think that we'll have, whether they're decentralized applications or serverless or just regular ones, I think everybody is going to start seeing the benefits of a decentralized model of infrastructure. That is just the same reasons, like people won't even know it's more safe, more secure, more reliable, network's always available. So I think you're definitely going to see that. So that's where Bluzelle will basically be that lead. And I think not just as a database, but evolving that you just become not just an infrastructure company, like I said, it's open source, but what other applications that we can run with it. So that would go into, data analytics, which companies we partner with or build ourselves or acquire, is having those on there. Big data, how that parlays into it. So I think the future will be, you won't just be a database company. Database companies will evolve down with being like kind of the full stack of what else they can offer and customers, so they can just go to them and get everything they need.
Right.
They'll just be data companies, and storage and management will just be one aspect of it.
Right. I mean, as kind of like the core foundational component, right? Like storage and databases, these services can kind of be made to other service providers. They can be built for application builders, built for platforms, or, across the board. So excited to see how that kind of evolves. As a service provider, what's your sales strategy right now for those service applications and blockchain applications?
Yeah, so this is where it's really exciting. Same with you guys. You get the product out there. It's starting to work. We can do, start working with companies one-on-one, regular startup stuff, right? So the areas that we're looking at is obviously blockchain. That, hey, which of the, in the next, month we'll be integrated into several of them. So we can say, hey, if you're building a dApp on there, come to Bluzelle. We've got a tier that you can use. often storage, it should accommodate your needs. So basically say, instead of using MongoDB or DynamoDB from Amazon, use us because we're built for the blockchain.
Right.
Another one is finding those specific use cases, whether they're serverless applications, because like I said, Bluzelle could be a serverless database. So what are the things people are building there, and they want those requirements. So I guess let me take it a step back. The main things that we're really good at is going to be simple deployment, so that people can just easily connect to us like a network. They don't have to deploy anything. Everything's already out there. Get going. Second is instant scalability. So like I said, addressing the whole thing of worldwide needs. Customers are everywhere. You just want to be able to scale on demand and have no management on the back end. Third would be, multi-region and multi-cloud support. So, we're not just replicated on AWS. It could be on a different distributed cloud computing system, cloud-based, or it could be on Google or a decentralized one, doesn't matter. And then pushing data to the edge. So once that'd be the fourth, and then obviously the fifth one would be like, instead of trying to guess what your costs are, like these 5 to 10 parameters, hey, what regions are you in? What's your storage need? Keep it easy. Now, taking all that back is, okay, who does that apply to? And the things that we saw were obviously is gaming and media streaming. So we're testing out with them, because games are on a global audience. Streaming media, even if it's, let's say, Bollywood films, people in India aren't just watching them, they're watching them in Japan, Korea, Brazil. And then obviously IoT, right? Talking to you, companies like yourself is, hey, who needs that support? Who's collecting all these unstructured data that they need to have managed better? So those are the specific use cases we see is blockchain, IoT, gaming, media streaming, and then looking at the service area.
Definitely. No, that totally makes sense. Kind of the high volume data industries that are really growing and adopting new technologies faster than others. How do you guys think about tailoring your roadmap to what's happening today, while also really not losing sight of the bigger picture?
Yeah, I mean, it's funny is because all of us, we wrote these roadmaps like, a year and a half, 2 years ago. And just like any startup, you're learning new, and these are all breakthrough technologies. So you have these guesses that you're making, and you're just learning and changing things as you can to adapt to what you need there. So for us, I think, we updated our roadmap a few months ago and saying, okay, what do we got to get done for now? Like, we realized that, hey, Bluzelle can be used as a cache first and then as a database. Now we're getting closer that the database is ready, integrate to other blockchains. I think we'll be updating our white paper and roadmap based on that because of the new information over the past year. So the eventual goal, the goal always is basically decentralized, fast performance, security, that's all there. Now, how it goes about, or which target markets or where you find probably changes along the way and meeting those needs. I mean, like for you guys, like IoT it's really a catch-all term. You're probably even finding segments within IoT that you guys are best at for now.
Yeah.
And so you'll be the full IoT platform, right?
Right. I mean, I think some learnings, I just got back from a trip from Europe, and it's really refreshing to go to these different regions. Obviously, Europe in the summer is great, but, we learned a lot about, I think in Americas and in Asia, they think of more of like a romanticized version of blockchain in a way, where they're still thinking about the very futuristic use cases around like, okay, what if all our medical records were on the blockchain and interoperable, and, in an IoT space, what if no one could hold my data and I can have the same user experience as I have today? Very great things and all things we're shooting for. But, Europe kind of has this approach of like, okay, what's available now? I want it, right? Like in the context of IoText, we're working on a lot of IoT and privacy things. They just want private data storage for their IoT networks. They don't have to really interoperate with many other folks, but they just want to keep their data out of the hands of, maybe some service providers or like trusted intermediaries that weren't so trusted, right? So, simplifying the case and presenting them almost as like, this is available today. Kind of the strategy you guys have was starting with caching and then moving on to more advanced things. But, yeah, I think it's also tricky to communicate that approach to the community that's looking for the hypey kind of news. But yeah, I mean, what are your thoughts on overall that, and does that kind of resonate with some of the things you're doing at Bluzelle?
Well, I mean, like I said, what we did before was, hey, it's a full database.
Mm-hmm.
First use case with cache, can we perfect that and make that speed while perfecting the rest of the database, which we'll be rolling out soon, that, hey, it's a full NoSQL database. Here's the use cases you can do, and we're updating everybody on that soon. Now, going back to your thing is, yeah, ideologically, I would love it if it was, hey, I want my data super private, it's censorship resistant, it's always available. But when you actually go talk to customers, what we found was they already assume that it's available, it's secure. What was really resonating, like for us, was, hey, it can be multi-region right away, and we don't have to spin stuff up, and it does that. Yeah. Oh, it can be no operations, basically no ops, no back-end management, is used as a service, and it goes where it needs to. Those are really the two things that really hit home. Is like, if you're building a product that's multi-region and you want to reduce the impact on your IT and overhead or back end, this is what you need right now. Right.
And I think it comes down to it's almost a little subjective around, like, there's saying in the tech industry that, for a product to replace its incumbent product, it needs to be 9 times better than the original product. And that's subjective though, right? Because as you said, some people are just looking for something that, some people are operating on dinosaur technology right now, and everything that we're talking about is already 9 times better. It's just a matter of, cost and kind of how to get into that picture. But we're looking forward to seeing, I think the point I'm trying to make here is, as we keep on evolving, we're going to hit that 9 times eventually. Okay. And that's where that mass adoption really come from.
Oh yeah. I think it's either you can sit there and wait a couple of years and hope you get that 9 times and then go to market, or you can do like where they're constantly testing, going out to market, talking to people and saying, okay, where can we fit in now?
Right.
Our eventual goal is to have that full, our romanticized end goal is still there, but you got to take some of those baby steps on the way.
Right. Absolutely. Well, Pavel, I had a great time talking with you. We talked all things about the past, present, and future of databases. I think I would like to end these kind of conversations with something forward-looking, like a bold prediction for this next year in crypto. Whether that's Bluzelle specific or just kind of industry focused, what can we look forward to in this year?
In 2019 or by the end of 2020?
Let's say August 2020.
I think we're going to have a bunch of platforms, products, infrastructure products are going to be there. Let's see. I think you'll have a lot of mid-sized companies coming up and want to compete with like the larger ones, starting to adopt a lot of these technologies. It might not be the biggest, like Fortune 100 out there, but there's a lot of high-value companies that are doing $100 million in sales.
Right.
And they're not running IT stuff, don't want the back ends, or it's like they can start using some of these decentralized technologies to further advance themselves. So I think that will probably end up being a sweet spot.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I'm excited to see that too, because, I think I've always said that a strong consortium of small to medium businesses is a much better use case for blockchain than an enterprise, right? Unless the enterprise has very disparate business units that are disconnected and, lack trust between those, but it's really about the greater good. So definitely looking forward to seeing more of that. Before we jump off, any final thoughts for the communities?
Yeah, I want to say, hey, thanks everybody for listening in, supporting projects like, IoTalks and Bluzelle. We're all building cool fundamental parts of the full ecosystem that we're all going. All these technologies are going to be working with each other. So the best thing they do is like, hey, the open support, and then, hey, they're finding customers or find target ones, pinging them and saying, hey, start using these products. That's probably the best thing for all of us getting adoption.
Absolutely. And maybe it's a good time to announce, we're working on first integration of Bluzelle into IoText network. So excited to share the results of that work. How can people find out more about Bluzelle, Pavel?
Easiest is obviously go to bluzelle.com, just get the basic information. But going to Twitter and our Telegram channels and talking to us, that's really good. And, basically that's how and we've got our blog just like everybody else. And, aside from announcing with you guys over the next couple weeks, showing, hey, which other platforms we're supporting. Because our goal is to be, an efficient off-chain storage for platforms like Autotext and saying, okay, we've got this covered and now we can get more customers together. And really it's all about that, is all us working together to get traction, right? Big traction.
Definitely. And we'll keep the communities updated on our progress. Thanks so much to Pavel for joining, and make sure to subscribe to IoTalks YouTube for more IoTalks. Thanks so much, Pavel. We'll talk soon.